Perky Pilgrim by J.T. Lawrence. TripAdvisor review, Bridgegate, 1 out of 5 stars. Being the intrepid traveller that I am, I have not been afraid to occasionally rough it. Subsequently, I have stayed in a few dastardly places in my life, but this one takes the cake. And I use the term cake in an idiomatic expression, as there is certainly no cake to be found here. No sponge puddings, no pastries, and certainly no scones. Tea time here is an affront to everything that is good and right in the world. As my dear Aunt Daphne used to say, the mind, she boggles, signor. My goodness, where to start? I feel overwhelmed by the sheer scope of the indignities I have endured inside these 4 walls, painted the colour of day-old gruel. It's a shameful, shameful establishment. Even though it's no secret that I am an accomplished writer, I am finding it difficult to write this review. But as Winston Churchill once said, this is no time for ease and comfort. It is time to dare and endure, so I shall try my best. Tally-ho! Here are my complaints so far. The mattresses are old and thin, and the springs poke you in the spleen if you let them. The bedding is abrasive on the naked skin and smells of boiled cabbage. The previously mentioned walls are grimy and graffitied. I try my best not to read the scrawled profanities at the risk of being transported back to my childhood nightmares when I would be trapped in a public school restroom stall. The walls also seem to close in each day. Now, I know this is not possible, but sometimes, when I lie on the bed and stare at the ceiling, I have the sensation that the room is getting smaller and smaller. Perhaps a fresh coat of paint would assist in this regard. Ideally, a bright, cheerful colour that does not remind one of getting one's face smashed into one's boarding school porridge. The toilet has no seat nor lid, and there is seldom any toilet tissue. You would think that toilet tissue would be ubiquitous in a place with so many arses around, but I'm afraid this is not the case. Now, I do hesitate to mention the disgraceful ablution facilities, as I don't want to lower the general tone of my reviews. But it is also my duty to inform you, dear reader, so I'm afraid it has come down to this. There is no cistern handle to speak of, and the pipes are often blocked, which causes the bowl to overflow. I don't have to tell you that on those days, it's an abysmal state of affairs, especially when your roommate suffers from protracted bouts of irritable bowel syndrome. It doesn't bear thinking about, but think about it we must, as we cannot ignore the cascading lake of toilet water that has become as much of a feature in this room as the small square window above our heads that taunts us with its view of the crisp blue sky just beyond our reach. Talking about arses, my roommate is a thoroughly awful man, named Smith, of all things. A madman, really, who likes to think of himself as a philosopher. The tripe that man speaks, well, let's just say it whiffs of our room's unique water feature. As if these accommodations are not torturous enough without having to listen to a man who quite clearly received his Ph.D. from a Lucky Dip cereal box. And speaking of cereal, oh, reader, I know I complained about the bland, touristy paella at that hotel in Ibiza, where the staff all rudely spoke Spanish, and the make-your-own pasta at coconut bungalows, but I have hit a dangerous new low here. Despite my sophisticated palate, I won't hesitate to tell you that I can handle pedestrian fare. I was, after all, brought up on stale bread, tinned bean soup and brown apples. There is a time and place for simple food, and this does not offend me. However, please believe me when I tell you that the slop that is served here is beyond any kind of redemption. The food is never warm, despite lying under the heat lamps in the canteen, attracting all manner of bacteria. We are offered bread rolls like rocks, powdered scrambled eggs that bounce if you drop them, congealed oats that turn to cement the moment they hit your stomach. And that is just breakfast. Don't get me started on lunches or dinners, or the infamous chicken stew that looks neon green on our blue melamine plates. Oh, It pains me, body and soul. Body, especially, and it's made clear on a daily basis that the same is true for Smith. I find the staff here incredibly rude. They seem to be, without exception, muscle-bound brutes who grunt commands and expect us to obey. I have tried to educate the man who services my room, but all he does is smirk in an unkind way. As I always try to round off my reviews on a positive note, I will tell you about the magnificent garden outside, which is the highlight of my day every day. There is a man here, Locklear, who keeps to himself and tends the grounds. His rose garden in particular is an absolute beauty to behold. It reminds me so of my beloved Aunt Daphne, who used to prune her roses to within an inch of their lives. But sometimes wounds are transformative. The cruelty paid off, and we were rewarded with a swathe of blooms in summer. The petals of silk and the profusion of scent, well, a fluorescence of a well-maintained rose garden can rouse even the most weary of spirits. Signing off with a reluctant 1 star. Reluctant because this establishment deserves far less. But I have just returned from a walk in the gardens, and it has made me feel overly generous. Sincerely, Alan Perkins. Dear Mr. Perkins, while I appreciate your review of Bridgegate, I must hasten to remind you that this establishment is not a B&B. And while you are incarcerated here, it may serve you well to remember that. The prison guards are not your staff, and I would refrain from criticizing the food served in the mess hall. If the head cook, Dante, gets wind of you insulting his cooking, well, let's just say there may be certain bodily fluid splashed into your next bowl of oats, and they won't be tears. I'd also caution you against speaking badly about fellow inmates on a public forum like this. If you continue to disparage your peers or the prison itself, I will have no choice but to remove your library and hence your online privileges. I appreciate your cooperation in this regard. Frederick Collis, Director at Bridgegate Prison, Department of Correctional Services. TripAdvisor Review, Bridgegate. 2 out of 5 stars. Well, I am happy to say that after leaving the original review, things around here have been improving. Just knowing that I have the director's ear makes a significant difference to my state of mind. Sometimes, in the hospitality business, it's enough to simply listen to your customers. But Mr. Collis went one further than that. The toilet has been fixed. It still has no lid or seat or handle, but the pipes have been unblocked and it no longer floods the room with water that smells of doom and regret. Acting on Mr. Collis's advice, I introduced myself to the head cook. Although, I must admit that I did find it difficult to not chuckle at his name, which I find so fitting for the blazing heat in the kitchen, and the kind of food he prepares, and offered my services. I explained to Dante that although I had never worked in a kitchen per se, I had enjoyed years of excellent food in all manner of restaurants and countries, and I was sure that I could be of assistance, perhaps as a taster and general advisor. Dante asked me to leave, as he was quite busy. He was punching dough for tomorrow's bread, but I think he appreciated my willingness to help. I've already started a list of items to address with him. 1. Do not smoke in the kitchen. Apart from this being a dangerous and disgusting habit, the ash can fall into the food. Guess who will give the bread a skip tomorrow morning? 2. Mashed potato is supposed to be white and fluffy and not taste like Grey's soap. 3. Margarine is not, in fact, an acceptable substitute for butter. In truth, I don't even think of the stuff as edible, but I realize that what is good for the goose is not always good enough for the gander, etc. 4. The same goes for processed cheese. It tastes like plastic. It may even be made out of plastic. I wouldn't be surprised. As a general rule, you should not feed your customers plastic. 5. Occasional baked goods would be very much appreciated. A good biscuit can form the foundation of a man's happiness and should not be overlooked. I have plenty more suggestions, but I think I'll go in with a short list on my first consultation. I don't want to overwhelm the man, as he certainly has enough on his plate. I have also begun to engage with the other guests here at Bridgegate, and I'm finding it a worthwhile cause. Usually, I go out of my way to avoid people, as I like to travel alone, but there are a great deal of residents here, and most of the time the company is simply inescapable. I've been chatting to that chap Locklear, who tends the roses and works in the library mentoring students, and I found him to be particularly good company. He is a reader and a thinker, not the cereal box kind, and we seem to get on swimmingly. While discussing Shakespeare, his daughter is studying Romeo and Juliet, he informed me that we have a Shakespearean story of sorts playing out here. Instead of the Montagues and the Capulets, however, we have the Blackjacks and the White Collars. Locklear, Smith and I automatically fall into the latter grouping, despite wanting nothing to do with the division. Alas, it appears we have no choice. Smith is still a challenge to live with. Have I told you yet that he hoards bananas and sleeps with them under his pillow? He says they help with his gut. The man smells like monkey world. Locklear and I also had a laugh about Dante's name, and I'm glad I'm not the only one who sees the relation between the head cook's infernal kitchen and the 9 circles of hell. That got us talking about nominative determinism, the idea that your name has a bearing on your destiny, like a jeweller called Stone or a seamstress called Taylor. And Locklear and I found it amusing that a man with his name would be a resident here. We do certainly appear to share an appreciation for irony. There is also a man in the Blackjacks called Axe, who walks around with a primitive shiv taped to his right pectoral muscle. Of course, this is not funny at all, but laugh we must, because without humour we would be nothing but unmoored boats in this stormy grey sea we are forced to navigate. I sometimes wonder how my life would have turned out if I had been born with a different name. I've always detested Perkins, but now it's stamped on my uniform and everyone here calls me that, so I grin and bear it. It is my real name, after all. It's always been a fascination of mine, names, and I'm forever changing my online profiles. I think it's interesting that people expect you to go by one name your whole life, despite how we humans are constantly changing. All in all, I feel that I'm starting to settle in a bit. Bridgegate gets an extra star from me, bringing the total to 2 stars out of 5. Sincerely, Alan Perkins, a.k.a. @Perky Pilgrim. Dear Mr. Perkins, while I appreciate your 2 stars, I must caution you again about sharing too much information on the internet. I see that you have quite a large following. Please remember that what you post on an international review site will remain in the public domain forever. Also, keep in mind that it is your responsibility to respect the privacy of your fellow inmates. While we are on the subject of privacy, it has come to my attention that you spend some time in communal areas sans trousers, and have even snagged an appropriate nickname. Please will you refrain from doing so? I don't feel that I need to give further explanation. Also, our head cook Dante has requested you be banned from the kitchen. I don't want to discourage you from thinking of ideas to improve the correctional facility, but perhaps it's best to leave Dante to cook his recipes his way. Please also exercise caution in what you call the Shakespearean story there in B-Wing. I urge you not to take sides or say or do anything that would stoke the conflict between the 2 groups. It is vital to your safety and others. I hope this note is constructive and assists you in keeping the peace. Sincerely, Frederick Collis, Director at Bridgegate Prison, Department of Correctional Services. TripAdvisor Review, Bridgegate, 3 out of 5 stars. My stay here at Bridgegate has become a most edifying experience, and for this I reward the place another star, despite its obvious shortcomings in the hospitality department. We may lack baked goods and cultural outings, but I'm getting to experience some real life within these gruel-coloured walls. And what is the point of living if one doesn't get to share these kind of grassroots encounters? For example, we have a support group meeting every Thursday where the resident psychologist comes in and we talk about crime, punishment, and redemption. It sounds like a Russian literary novel by the brothers Karamazov, a Dostoevsky snorefest, if you will, but let me tell you, it is not. Hearing about the others' mistakes has made me think about my own. Now, I will admit to being difficult in the beginning, stubbornly refusing to confess that I had done anything wrong. But the stories of the other men have suffused me with courage and helped me come to terms with the damage I have wreaked in my own life and others. I'd specifically like to apologize on record and in this public forum to Susie Dos Santos of the Golden Beach Hotel Group, Pty Limited. I would send her a direct message, but Dr. Richards explained to me that Miss Dos Santos does not want to be contacted by me for any reason, even for an apology, and I must respect her wishes. I still hope she stumbles upon this post. Isn't that why I share my thoughts here? But I will not contact her personally. It pains me to admit this, but I have done enough harm. Also, I can't imagine that Mr. Santos is the kind of woman who writes to men in prison, so it would feel to me as if the conversation was forever suspended, like a half-healed wound, and that would bother me immensely. As it is, I feel tainted by the harm I have caused. I feel as if my poor life choices will always be with me, just under my skin. A permanent tattoo of self-reproach. Dr. Richards has given us homework. I am to think about my childhood and consider how it has shaped my adult behavior. I won't beat around the bush. This will be very difficult for me. But I suppose the road to redemption has never been an easy journey. Signing off now for a quick walk in the gardens before girding my loins for one of Dante's dreadful chicken stews. The other residents snicker and say that he places whole chickens into the grinder to make this particular casserole. I thought they were joking before Smith found what looked like a broken beak in last week's serving. I became, understandably, upset. Even more so than Smith, who just shrugged and carried on slurping up his food. When I get overwhelmed by these thoughts, I sing La Traviata under my breath, and that helps me to calm down. It helps me to remember that, broken beaks or not, they are still beautiful things in this world. Sincerely, Alan Perkins, a.k.a. Perky Pilgrim. Dear Mr. Perkins, I am pleased to hear that you are settling down, and that you are having constructive sessions with Dr. Richards. I urge you to keep up the good work. I will have a word with Dante regarding the chicken casserole. Sincerely, Frederick Collis, Director at Bridgegate Prison, Department of Correctional Services. TripAdvisor Review, Bridgegate 3 out of 5 stars. I feel as if my consciousness has been smashed open. My soul is now a portal for all the bad memories and traumatic events as they burst forth from my subconscious, shredding my state of mind as they do so. Unwelcome evocations with glinting silver barbs. So much buried trauma now being hoisted up to the light. So much psychic pain. Dr. Richards says that it is good that we are making real progress, but it feels terrible. It feels as though I am being suffocated by the heaviness of the thick black cloud that is the past I have tried so hard to forget. The past I have been running away from my entire adult life. Oh, how I wish I could escape the torturous thoughts, scramble away from them. But I know that if I do that, nothing will change. Locklear has been a good friend. He listens to me sob about my deplorable childhood and tells me about his daughter at home, who writes to him regularly and keeps him up to date with her tumultuous teen life, the excitement and heartache of youth. He is deeply regretful that he cannot be with her as she grows up. He plants a rose bush for every letter he receives. You can tell how very much he loves her, which somehow makes me feel better and worse at the same time. The Blackjacks are becoming more aggressive. They have seen the chink in my armor and make no secret of it. Of course, their taunting only serves to deepen my despair, because when they are around me, I'm instantly transported back to when I was a boy being terrorized by the school bullies, who would abuse me in the cruelest of ways. It brings flashbacks of being punched in the stomach and bug-washed and having my fingers pulled so far back that I was certain they would snap. I am also made aware of how I grew up to bully others, which will remain a significant sorrow for me for as long as I may live. Oh, how I long for an escape from this terrible reality. Sometimes I feel as if I would welcome Axe's shiv being plunged into my aching heart, because then I would be free from the doom and hopelessness. I imagine death with golden winged palms lifting me out of here and delivering me to a place exuding warmth and light and the welcoming embrace of my imaginary Aunt Daphne and her comforting bosom. It would smell of her sweet perfume and her impossibly light, freshly baked scones. And I would finally be able to forget everything and rest. Perkins. Dear Mr. Perkins, I'm afraid to inform you that your cellmate Smith has been injured in an altercation in the weights room. We are investigating the incident and will deal with the perpetrators accordingly. Sincerely, Frederick Collis, Director at Bridgegate Prison, Department of Correctional Services. TripAdvisor Review, Bridgegate, 3 out of 5 stars. Oh, I feel like I am being crushed under the grief of this terrible thing. Just as I thought I couldn't possibly feel worse, Smith is almost killed by those reckless barbarians in B-Wing. He's been hospitalized with broken ribs and a fractured skull. Locklear has these dark marks under his eyes, as if he has not slept for days. What is the point of living? I see none, only darkness and despair. Perkins. Dear Mr. Perkins, I understand your concern and your grief. Dr. Richards has informed me that you are making great strides. Keep going. I'm afraid to say that we have been getting complaints about your belting out Italian opera at the top of your voice. Please try to keep your singing voice to an acceptable level as not to disturb the piece. Also, thank you for making an effort to wear pants. Smith's condition is improving. His doctor says that if all goes well, he'll be discharged within the next couple of days. So, things should be back to normal soon. Sincerely, Frederick Collis, Director at Bridgegate Prison, Department of Correctional Services. TripAdvisor Review, Bridgegate, 5 out of 5 stars. Things are certainly looking up. I am feeling significantly better today after a tough couple of months of exercising my demons. Let me tell you, Dante's kitchen has nothing on what was going on inside my head, and Dr. Richards is nothing short of a genius. He tore open my psyche and burnt it to the ground. A more humble man, a more whole man, has risen from the ashes. How desperately paradoxical that it took a trip here for me to wake up to a better life. Smith is back among us. He is not quite himself, but we are helping him to regain his former health. Axe has been sent to the maximum security wing, so we shan't be seeing him again. We are incredibly relieved, although the remaining Blackjacks have made it clear that we shouldn't get too comfortable with the status quo. This morning, in the canteen, one of the brutes lifted his shirt and flashed Axe's shiv at us. I picked up a bread roll, hard as a rock as always, and thought that Dante's cooking might come in handy after all. Locklear's roses are in full bloom, and he has recently had a letter from his daughter, which improves his mood for days. The sky seems more blue The air smells sweeter, and I feel like a new man. Alan Perkins, a.k.a. at Perky Pilgrim. Dear Mr. Perkins, please be advised that your early parole application has been approved. Your good behavior, as well as a convincing report from Dr. Richards, secured the approval from the parole board. It also pleases me to inform you that your application for early parole on behalf of Mr. Michael Locklear has also been approved. It was reportedly an easy decision for the board. Apart from your excellent letter, Mr. Locklear has been an asset to the facility, working hard in the library and the garden and tutoring his fellow inmates. As far as I know, he had no plans to apply at all, so he is in your debt. You will both be released at the end of this month, Friday the 31st of November, so please make the necessary arrangements. Congratulations. I have spoken with Dante, and he volunteered to bake a cake for your farewell party. I will make more toilet paper available on that day. This will be for the traditional bunting at Bridgegate parties, not because I expect Dante's cake to be problematic. I will be following your future reviews on TripAdvisor with interest, and I wish you everything of the best. Sincerely, Frederick Collis, Director at Bridgegate Prison, Department of Correctional Services. The end.